Lemmuel, are you there? We're starting off. This is the first podcast we've done in 2 weeks because YouTube thought I needed a vacation. May have been right, maybe not. But they thought I needed a 1 week vacation. And I'll blame Paul Frum for that vacation because if anybody was giving medical advice, which he wasn't, it was him last week. But, you know, hey, Lemuel, you need to turn around so that we can see your face. You need to have your face sort of the light shining on your face. Otherwise, you look extremely dark. How you doing? It's good to see you. But it would be better to hear you. I can't hear you.
I'm unmuted.
I cannot hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. I cannot hear you at all. I cannot hear you at all. So we need you to adjust something or other. You're looking great, by the way. It's been like 2 or 3 years since I've seen you. Okay, I'm glad you can hear me, but you're just mute. You know, all I can hear is a Simon and Garfunkel song, you know, The Sound of Silence.
Yes. Trying to see what I can do.
Phone. Oh, there it is. I'm calling for help.
Okay.
Seed Sue, how are you, Seed Sue?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thank you.
You're quiet. You're like, Sean, we need your help. I've got two guests on here. Both of them are silent, including Bill Johnson.
Yeah.
All right.
Let me go get another room here.
Help!
All right.
Help!
Can you hear me now?
I called Sean. I don't know what's going on. You can hear me, right? Right?
Yes,
right?
I can hear you. But you can't hear me, right? You can't hear
This
me?
is bizarre. They can hear me, but I cannot hear them.
Okay.
I can hear Bill.
And Bill looks great. Lemmy looks great.
So
I look like me, unfortunately.
all right, you're Lemuel, right?
Yeah.
So we can hear each other. He can't. We can't hear. Okay. All right.
This is our first. Oh, you can hear Bill.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear him too. Tell him that
Lemmy can hear Bill.
We can hear each other.
But I can't hear either one of them.
Oh, your speaker's probably off.
Okay.
Maybe we shouldn't be recording this.
No, I can hear you now. Lemmy, can I hear you?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes. I don't know.
Good.
That's bizarre. Well, yes. So the little embarrassing introduction was recorded, but no medical misinformation was provided. So YouTube has no complaints against us.
Okay, good.
It's amazing. Anyhow, Bill, do you remember Lemmuel Howell?
Nope, never heard of him in my entire life.
Well, Lemmuel is from Augusta, Georgia, right?
Yeah, I am. I've been on here with you before, Bill.
Okay.
You've been on here with me too. You know, Bill, I don't know if you remember me or not. It's been 2 solid weeks, and that's terrible. But with Lenny, it's been like 2.5 years or something. It's been a very long time, but he's active over in Georgia, and he describes himself as a Christian white nationalist for blood and soil. So it's good to have him. And I don't know. I mean, is the definition of race a medical question, Bill? Are we going to get in trouble for trying to define race tonight?
Yeah, I don't know, but it's interesting how you said blood and soil. I'm working on a project I think that you know all about, and it's moving quite along. It's a musical, and in order to do one of the chants, it went better as soil and blood. So that's what the author decided to do that. But I think the real phrase is blood and soil. Is that correct?
Yes. A lot of people want to criticize it as a Nazi slogan, but really and truly, that's two major things that define a nation.
Well, where did it come from originally? And has it been around? Because I know that the Nazis used the swastika, which has been around for eons. So what about that?
Right. The phrase may have been coined by the Nazis. I don't know, but the same ideology, the same concept of tribalism has been around for thousands of years, and that's what they don't realize.
Well, why is it that the phrase is blood and soil and not soil and blood? Is there a meaning behind why one comes before the other?
Well, I think that your people is what makes up is the most important part of the most important part of the nation, I guess. But so you could say soil and blood because borders also define a nation as well.
Yeah, but I kind of agree with you. Blood is the more important component, and then you guys can pick up and move to a different soil, but the blood has to stay with you and has to stay clean. So I think for the purposes of our artistic purposes, they switched it around, and that's okay.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, B comes before S in the alphabet. Right.
Yes.
But okay. I mean, the English people stayed English when they came from United Kingdom to first the United States and then to Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. I looked it up, and according to Wikipedia, Richard Walter Darré popularized the phrase "blood and soil" at the time of the rise of NS Germany in his 1930 book, Neuadel aus Blut und Boden. That was the name of the book of Neuadel aus Blut und Boden, a new nobility based on blood and soil, in which he proposed a systematic eugenics program, arguing for selective breeding as a cure-all for the problems plaguing the state. So it was Walter Darré.
Now, well, why has the term eugenics received such hatred in our lifetime?
Well, that's a good question there, Bill. I think a lot of it has to do with the people who they've demonized that use it, like Adolf Hitler and several other people. They don't. I mean, I've never talked too much about eugenics. I'm an optics kind of guy. Hitler obviously was for it, but there's a guy that y'all may have heard of named Gregor Strasser, who tried to work alongside Hitler, tried to remain in his good graces, but unfortunately it didn't work out in his favor, and he was found mysteriously dead after he left this National Socialist Workers' Party. And then I know some people suspect it was Hitler behind that, but never was proven. Or some people suspect it was Hermann Göring behind it. We don't know for sure who was behind it, but all we know is after he exposed the people in the party leadership, he was found dead. And I don't personally want to stop anyone from breeding. I just don't want genocide.
Yeah, okay, that's one approach, but I think that the concept of eugenics has been around for centuries, and why would they demonize it just because Germany in the 1930s and 1940s embraced it? Because I take a little bit different approach than you do. I think that, if I were sitting around in a Sunday school and they went around the room and says, okay, say one word that will make the world a better place. Someone would say love, someone would say peace. And when you got to me, I'd say eugenics. So that probably wouldn't go over too well in a Sunday school class, but I think that concept is probably going a lot farther in making a better world than either love or peace ever can do.
Here's
Right.
what I would, just to answer the question, why does eugenics have such a bad reputation? In all fairness, I would say it is because eugenics has been poorly used and somewhat abused, actually, especially in the United States. I'm much more familiar with the abuses of eugenics in the United States than I am even of what really happened in Germany. But in the United States, a lot of progressives idolize the memory of Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, but it's well known that Holmes was a great eugenicist, and one of the cases that reached the Supreme Court back in the 1920s involved the sterilization of imbeciles. And a lot of people were committed to insane asylums based on this concept of imbecility, who were fairly normal. And really, their imbecility had more to do with being poor and disadvantaged and uneducated. I remember one. I should have turned this off. It's off. I remember this one exhibit, actually. I forget. I think it was in Boston, actually, of about eugenics, and it was the art created by people who had been committed to insane asylums and declared imbeciles back during, the eugenics in the U.S. actually continued until the 1950s very actively, and they created some very beautiful art, including very complicated stitching and tapestries even. And so I think that part of the problem is abuse. And I mean, I live in the city of New Orleans, and I don't know how much time either one of you have spent in the city of New Orleans, but if you zero, you've never been here at all?
I don't think I've ever been there.
Oh my God! Well, you gotta come here. You too, Lemmy. We need to have a party here. Not necessarily this week because this is Mardi Gras, but what I was going to say is one thing about New Orleans, as great and wonderful a city as it is in so many ways, that irritates everybody, including me, is the quality of the streets. Our football team here is called the Saints. You both know that, I think.
Sure.
And everybody asks, well, why? Why are in this famous Sin City? Why do you have a football team called the Saints? Because it doesn't really reflect city personality or city morality, typically, or even what the main attraction of tourists is. And I finally figured out the answer, and I think it's real. This city has a football team called the Saints because all the streets are holy.
Wow.
Okay, could be. But now you mentioned.
Here's my point. If the government can't maintain consistently good streets, which is, let's face it, fairly simple, low-tech stuff, how can we trust the government to maintain the quality of genetics population-wide?
Right, but if we don't do anything and we just continue willy-nilly, we're going to have what Lemmuel Howell really doesn't want, which is the genocide of the white race. And so we need to start doing something. And I think you're probably right. I hadn't thought about that. There probably was a lot of misuse and abuse of the eugenic approach back then. But if you take a look at it now, for example, we're doing equally bad things on the other side. We're creating dysgenic programs that we don't need to go into because we all know what the dysgenic programs are. But just one example is we used to define not imbecile, but what's just cognitively impaired or stupid or whatever it is. Maybe it's imbecile at a certain IQ level. And what do we do? Since we can't raise the IQ of certain levels of the population, we've lowered the definition of imbecility so that you got to be a lot dumber before you fall into that category. And I just think there's just dysgenics all the way around. But I agree with you. I see what you mean. The government should not be responsible for, we can't give them the right to enforce eugenics. So I will take on that responsibility. So don't give it to the government, give it to me.
Here's what I think. I mean, I think that our brand of eugenics is pretty simple. We want a white country, and so that's really what it gets to the topic that I wanted to talk about a little bit today. What does it mean to be white? What does race mean? And I was inspired to ask this question because, as Bill knows, every week almost, I go to a really awful movie, at least one. And the really awful movie last night was a total accident. I intended to go to a movie about Van Gogh, which should have been.
About who?
The artist, Vincent van Gogh.
Oh, Van Gogh, okay.
It should have been a really uplifting cultural experience to go to a movie about Vincent van Gogh. But there was some sort of technical problem at Wildwood at the Prytania last night with the Van Gogh movie. And so as either a consolation prize or a punishment, I'm not sure what, they had us watch another art movie, which was the story of a gay Afghan immigrant who ended up in Copenhagen, Denmark, and he got, I mean, it almost made me seasick. There was so much weird stuff in it, but he ended up with a postdoc in gender studies at Princeton. And, you know, that's phenomenal because on the one hand, I guess if he's gay, it's not really going to affect the gene pool much either way. He ended up marrying a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Dane, and they moved into a really expensive, beautiful country house together. And I don't know, you know, at the Battle of Yorktown, supposedly the British troops, as Washington was accepting Cornwallis' surrender, Washington and Lincoln, I should say, my direct ancestor, Benjamin Lincoln. As Washington and Lincoln were accepting Cornwallis's surrender, the British band played The World Turned Upside Down. And this movie, it was called Flee, F-L-E-E. I told everybody afterwards I thought it should be called Flee, F-L-E-A.
Yeah.
It was The World Turned Upside Down. I mean, gay Afghan refugee goes to Denmark and becomes a postdoctoral fellow at Princeton in the United States in gender studies. Bang! End of eugenics. Extreme opposite. Okay. Who are the Afghans and why should they and Iranians, for example, be a favored class of immigrants in Europe right now? I know that Lemmy has some Scandinavian Nordic resistance contacts, so I really wanted him today for that.
Yeah, honestly, I don't believe the Iranians and the or overall, I don't believe that the Iranians or any Middle Eastern migrants are compatible with the Scandinavian culture at all. But of course, when you watch movies, they'll try to make them look compatible. And I even have friends who are in Sweden that tell me they have Persian friends and say they're good people. They love Scandinavia. They hate Islam. That's good and all. But I don't know. Some people go as far to argue that Iran means land of the Aryans, and I have Googled it. It does appear to be true. I don't know where I don't know where the conspiracy theories head in that direction. I've never went that far, and yeah. So that all I can say is I don't think they should be prioritized at all.
Yeah, and also on top of that, we're going to see a real lowering of the prestige level of these Ivy League schools because they are so hell-bent on bringing in all sorts of different cultures and races and peoples into their academic studies that it's going to really reduce the value of that degree. I mean, it used to be that there was the old boys network. If you went to Princeton or if you went to Columbia, you went to Harvard, you had an immediate connection with very successful, good people, not necessarily moral people, but good people, good white people. Now you just have just a whole hodgepodge, and it's the Bush, it's the failure of the Bush statement, diversity is our strength. It's going to destroy the Ivy League schools, and that's probably a good thing. Charles, was the movie you're going to see Lust for Life?
No, it's called Flee, Flee.
No, Flee. That was when you did see, but the one about Van Gogh, was that Lust for Life?
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah, because that was the famous one when I was growing up. It was about him. Yeah. Well, I don't know. You also mentioned Yorktown as your ancestor being involved in the settlement of the dispute there. But Yorktown, of course, was named after York. And I just read in the papers today that the city of York is trying to kick out Prince Andrew, or whatever, is it Andrew, whatever, from being the Duke of York because he's such a bad, has such a bad reputation, and he's such a bad person. And so once I get the authority to institute eugenics, I think I'm going to get rid of the entire British aristocracy, and we'll start with a new group. And you might say that the oldest son, what's his name? Not the one that married the Negro, but the other one, Prince what?
William.
Prince William. You might say, well, Prince William is a pretty good guy, but you can't have somebody that ugly be a king. So we got to get rid of that entire despicable group of people and put in some new aristocracy, some new royalty.
Well, that's an interesting point because, of course, the royal family of England seems to have been going down, 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 opposite of eugenics. And strange, I mean, basically, strange to say, I mean, you could say that Queen Victoria almost, not single-handedly, but with her one single womb, managed to wipe out monarchy in Europe because, I mean, her grandchildren, George V, Kaiser Wilhelm, and Tsar Nicholas II, basically set out to kill each other and came very close to succeeding, wiping out everything that was good and beautiful in 19th century Europe. If it didn't die in 1918, it died in the subsequent World War II. And I mean, that was, again, eugenics is so risky because on the one hand, there's this tendency to say that the descendants of great people will be great, but the British monarchy and the monarchies of Europe are almost proof positive that that is not the case.
Well, then that goes to a more fundamental question: should we even have a monarchy? When I was all growing up, we were all pro-democracy, and I didn't want a monarchy, and I was, believed the same thing that George Washington believed. We shouldn't have that. And then I came to Los Angeles, and I was just a young lawyer here, and I was just starting to get involved locally with politics, and I met a young kid, many years younger than I was. His name was Chris Donnellan, his name, and we were talking about that. And he says, no, Mr. Johnson, we need to have a monarchy because a king is supposed to lead the people. And even if you don't have give him political control, he's supposed to lead the people, lead his people. And so I could see that concept, but it's right. Because when you have Prince Charles coming out and say, and this was 20 years ago or 25 years ago, I'm no longer defender of the faith, I'm defender of faith. So let all the Muslims come in, because I defend their right to have faith just as much as Christianity. And so I agree with you. It's a slippery slope where it's a dangerous approach to have a monarchy. But I think if you do it right, it still might work.
I mean,
Interesting perspective, Bill. Of course, it's not popular to say as an American, as you've already pointed out, but I've kind of thought along the same lines in recent years, honestly.
So in addition to me being in charge of eugenics, I'll be in charge of picking the next monarchs for the various countries. So I got a lot on my plate.
the first, you say that George Washington was against monarchy. I think that he sort of had a remarkable sense of the pulse of the people. There were people like Alexander Hamilton who were not so secretly in favor of establishment of a monarchy. And George Washington could easily have become king of the United States if he had wanted to be. But I think he correctly read that people, even though they might have accepted him as monarch, he could achieve a new kind of immortality by, doing what Shakespeare had Mark Antony say about Julius Caesar: "Thrice I offered him the crown, and thrice he did refuse." That famous line from Mark Antony's funeral oration. And people don't really pay much attention to it, but the flag and Great Seal of the United States is at least in part based on the old Washington family shield. Did you all know that?
I didn't.
The red and white stripes and the star. It was a single star above and Washington's family crest.
Now, why is it that Washington didn't have any children? Was there some sort of medical reason for that? I wonder. That's maybe
he married a rich old woman.
Yeah.
Who was not childbearing age. He married for money. Sorry.
Okay.
He was the richest man in the colonies.
Okay. All right. Oh, very good.
But anyhow, maybe that was another reason why he didn't care that much for monarchy. It never could have been hereditary. So, but who would you? Okay, Bill, I know you're a great Donald Trump fan. Would you want Donald Trump to be a king?
No, I think if we're going to establish a monarchy, I think you should search far and wide for a good family man. And I think that it is most important who the queen is, because she's going to nurture and raise the children. And that's where I think eugenics comes into play, because if you have a good man and a good woman, it is more likely that you'll have good children if the woman rears them properly. So I think what I would do is I would scour the country for good quality people, and then pick one, and then maybe have the successors not be chosen by whatever the term is, primogeniture, the firstborn. I'd have it done by maybe a committee of good people. I don't know. And maybe look at who should continue to do it among a certain select people. But I don't know.
You live in Los Angeles, and do you think that one risk of installing a monarchy in the U.S. was it would be purely on the basis of looks, and so some idiot Hollywood star would be nominated to be king, and we'd end up with basically an even more idiotic idiocracy than we have.
Well, I think that today's looks, they would go the exact opposite of someone who's good looking. I just read in the newspaper today that Victoria's Secret just picked its first model who has Down syndrome. And so if that's who we're picking out to be models, you can't expect Los Angeles to pick good looking guys as king. So, there's got to be a realignment of our thought processes for us to pick someone good.
Isn't
that's right. That's right. I think it should be someone who Bill Johnson said is a good family man, good family values, and who is a man of faith, and his wife is a woman of faith, and she wants to be that traditional role of a woman.
Yeah. And the king should work. He should have a job, not just go around and go to functions. He should have a job.
I'm in total agreement.
I'm reeling from people tell me news stories that I simply did not know, and I sometimes wish that they hadn't. Can you all see this? I mean, she's not too bad. She's not horrible looking, but you can tell that she's got those Down syndrome features.
Yeah.
Well, I heard, I guess, a meme or a thread or exchange. Someone had said, well, if you want to know who rules this country, the one who rule the country are the people that you can't criticize, implying that, talking about the Jews. And someone wrote, oh, we're ruled by Down syndrome people because you can't criticize a Down syndrome person. And so that was kind of a snarky comment. But I can criticize Down syndrome people. I don't want them to be not models, and I don't want them to. I wouldn't want one in my family. And I wouldn't want them to be anywhere near anything of importance, like being a model for people to look at.
And talk about anti-eugenics. If you promote, as Victoria's Secret is basically about sex. Sex was originally a concept of reproduction. If you promote reproduction of people with Down syndrome, that is what's farther than 180 degrees?
Fauciism.
Huh?
Fauciism.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? I mean, you're promoting radical degeneration. I mean, eugenics would be that I guess you should try to avoid people being born with Down syndrome. I mean, abortion's a very controversial thing, but basically weeding out people with terrible birth defects. Oh God, this is disturbing. Why did you tell us something this to us on a Friday? I mean, I think this is horrible. I mean, let me rescue me. My jaw was about to hit the floor here. I had not heard that. And it's just indicative of how much is wrong with this country. Everything is upside down. Like you say, everything that's good is bad. Everything that's bad is good.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just speechless right now. Let me rescue me.
Well, we can move on to other. What was your original topic? I mean, I've taken this to so many different levels. What was your original question?
How do we define race? And with specific reference to the question, are Afghans white?
I would say no, Afghans are not white, and I would say that because I don't know. I tend to agree with Jared Taylor on this issue. I remember I don't know, it was in the last 2 or 3 years he was debating CNN's Fareed Zakaria on a radio show, And of course, Fareed Zakaria tries to trivialize it, as do most lefties. They try to ask, what does it mean to be white? The white race is the only race that becomes trivialized, and others are not. The black race is not. The Orientals are not, and then Arabs are not. They don't try to trivialize those, just us. And I try to lay it flat and say, anyone whose ancestry comes primarily from Europe in the past 500 years, and I'm not talking about the Spaniards in Mexico, because they have too much of the Aztec and Mayan blood in them, so that's kind of irrelevant.
Many years ago, before the internet, I was appearing on a TV show, and Tom Metzger was on the TV show also. Tom Metzger, he's dead now, but he had a group called WAR, White Aryan Resistance, very extreme white nationalist. And we appeared on the same show together, and Tom Metzger came with a whole entourage of young supporters. And so then the audience was primarily filled with people who hated us, but the whole audience was filled with anti-us, and then a whole bunch of Tom Metzger supporters. And one of the Metzger supporters was an Armenian guy. He was a young Armenian fellow. And we were talking, and we got a little bit of argument. And I said, well, you're not even white. And that just sent him off in a tizzy. So when we got in there to start showing, the biggest heckler, he was sitting right behind me, the biggest heckler was one of White Aryan Resistance supporters, because I said Armenians aren't white. And boy, he chewed me out all through the whole show. So, however, if he's listening, my opinion still remains the same. I kind of agree with you. European, Northern European. That's what I consider to be white. I don't consider Lebanese to be white. One time I was at the airport in LAX, and some guy who was, I guess he was Lebanese, his whole family, he came up and says, do you know where this hotel is? And I looked at the hotel. It was really kind of out of the way hotel, but it was right near my office downtown. So I said, I'll take you. I'll take your whole family to the hotel. So we all packed up I had a Cadillac, and we took him down to his hotel. And he had very, very blue eyes. And I said, I'm surprised that you have blue eyes. He said, well, no, Lebanese, there are Lebanese with blue eyes. And so they may be Lebanese with blue eyes, but if my daughter came home saying, I want to marry a Lebanese, boy, I'd bend her over my knee and I'd whack her. So there may be some Lebanese that have blue eyes, but they're not white.
Right. And here's what I'd respond to that with, who want to use the argument, well, they have blue eyes. I have a friend who's an Egyptian, and I would be glad to introduce you to him sometime, Charles and Bill. He's not a nationalist, but he's actually an Orthodox Christian, and he was telling me that he since he's got hazel eyes, he was talking about through research, basically the Crusaders when they came through there, they bred with the Europeans, and that's why some of the Middle Eastern people have those traits, physical traits in them.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable.
Yeah, I think that's why some of them have blue, green, or even hazel eyes. That's the only reason why it came from the European side.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, of course, it wasn't just the Crusaders. I mean, it was also the Romans and the Greeks under Alexander, the Ptolemies and the Seleucids. It's a very complicated question, because I mean, I've known Syrians, even not just Lebanese, Syrians, who were blonde hair, blue-eyed, and really quite objectively beautiful people. I don't know that I think that
well, what about the Basques? The Basques are a weird group of people. I think they're probably white, but where the heck do they come from? And on top of that, you have the Finns. The Finns, their language is part of the Ural-Altaic language group, and the Japanese consider themselves to be part of the Ural-Altaic language group. And I think linguistics link them together just because they have the same endings of the changing the deflections at the end of their sentences and the verbs, so they put them together. But as a result, the Japanese think, hey, I'm related to the Finns. So if you go over, I went to Finland with my family one time, and you have all sorts of these Finnish towns that have manga. They cater to the Japanese who are coming over there because they think I'm related to the Finns, and so it's a big tourist attraction between Finland and Japan. So much so that if you ask the king or the emperor of Japan, I guess the one before the one now, what his favorite piece was, and he'd say it's Finlandia by Sibelius. And so you have a lot of mixed up beliefs, and it's basically everybody wants to have ties to white people. You know, it's like that old adage on what is it called, on St. Patrick's Day, everybody wants to be Irish, but on Martin Luther King Day, no one wants to be black.
Well, yeah, I'm learning so much this this section. This is great. Is it true that this is on from Quora? Is it true that Finnish and Japanese have a linguistic connection, or is that just a myth? Santu Kakkonen, he must be Finnish. Yes and no. As you can see from the various answers, there exist a lot of theories about the matter. Anyhow, the Finnish language has no common points to the Western culture, but its closest relatives are in the East. Wow, there was a split 25,000 BC migration. Oh, well, this is way too complicated for this. I'll have to follow up here. But I mean, the Finnish language is most closely related to Turkish and Hungarian. I mean,
those are all Ural-Altaic languages, and Japanese tries to be a shirt-tail relative of that group.
That's really interesting. But I mean, in Hungary, there's no question about the Finns and Hungarians being white.
Yeah.
How about the Turks?
No.
Well, the Turks now they're mixed with too much Arab blood.
Okay, then how do we define race? I mean, it really does seem that all of us feel that the Boden part of Bluten is very important.
That's a good point. You being were educated in the law and were a lawyer for many years. There have been many Supreme Court and appellate court decisions deciding who and what is white. And you have the ascertainable trace test. If you have any ascertainable trace of a certain admixture of blood, you are considered to be non-white. Take a guess. What would that admixture be? Which group? Which group, if you have even a single drop of that blood, you're not considered white?
Negro.
That's right. So the Supreme Court cases, that if you have any admixture of black blood, Negro blood, you are not white. Then you have cases where you had a school district of where you had all these white kids who were and going to one school, and then you had the blacks going to another school. At that time, were mostly only whites or only blacks, and someone from Taiwan or from China, I guess, wanted their kids. They wanted to send the kids to the white school. So there was a Supreme Court case or an appellate court case. Is the Chinese kid white? And the court case says, nope, he's got to go with the blacks. He's not white. So he's sitting in there with a whole bunch of with black kids because he couldn't go to the white room. So there are a lot of court cases that decide these things, and some of them are. There's also the percentage test. If you have more than 1/8 blood, non-white blood, then you're non-white. So, but of course now we're getting there's so much mixture that is going to have to be redefined. And you have over in India, for example, you had the ancient codes that I think if you that I think miscegenation was punishable by death because they did not want the mixture. But if you take a look at it, 3,000 years down the road, it doesn't make any difference because they're all of them are Indians. None of them are white.
They have to slaughter the whole population.
Yeah, but it used to be, I think there was a big argument saying that originally the upper class Indians were indeed white, and maybe they'd come over from Iran or something like that. But then Russia, yeah. But then I don't know whether that's true or not. I think there's a lot of historical revisionism. Some of it's true and some of it's not true. So I don't know. But it is interesting. You have those mummies in Urumqi that were in the very eastern portion of China in the Gobi, not the Gobi Desert, but some sort of desert.
Tarim Basin was
Tarim Basin. And if you take a look at their pictures, man, they're blonde and fair and blue-eyed, and they're like 6'6", and the women are, there's one of the women's like 6'3". They're dressed in like Celtic weaves on their clothes, and this was like 3,000 years ago. Very handsome people, and they would fit in right today because they all had tattoos on their head. But that there are white people there, and if you go in there and they say that what are the name of the people that the Chinese are now beating up on in that area? The Uyghurs or whatever they're called.
Uyghurs.
Yeah, however you pronounce it. But they may not be very much Chinese, but they're certainly not white because they had mixed themselves out 3,000 years ago.
And there's, again, the elements of race. This is sort of because you asked about the Basque, and the Basque are surrounded on all sides, of course, by Spanish and French, i.e. Indo-European speakers. Indo-European is this term that their name for themselves may well have been something like Arya, Aryan, meaning that we are the noble people. This is the origin of the Brahmins in India, the white group, the Brahmins and Kshatriya, the two highest castes of the Vedic caste system, who ruled over the Sudra, who are basically considered blacks. And yeah, in India is almost impossible to sort out racially anymore because I know Brahmins. I know actually a lot of Brahmins, and basically I hate to say it, but they kind of look like Mexicans. Where do we do this? Because the whole concept of Aryan and Indo-European is those mummies in China that you're talking about are associated with a language isolate known only from certain texts, Buddhist texts, called Tocharian A and B, and those are indisputably Indo-European languages. And then you've got the association of their racial phenotypes. And then in India, you have some of the oldest Indo-European texts in the world, and the legend of the conquest, and the modern reality.
Well, when I was at Harvard, I was talking with an Indian woman who was going there as well. And I didn't know, but who people come where, but I'd heard the term Dravidian, and I thought, oh, Dravidian, that's a cool sounding name. And I just learned that as they're from India. So I asked this gal, she was, I guess, Brahmin. I asked her, are you Dravidian? She about chewed my head off. She just got so mad, was so insulted. And I learned what Dravidian was. They are the lowest class in India. And I thought, well, it's a cool name, but boy, it sure didn't go over with this gal.
Dravidian and Sudra go, those are concepts. Sudra means the untouchables, basically.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I learned quickly. You don't ask someone if they're Dravidian. But okay.
So, Wait, let me, where do you think we draw the line? I mean, I hate to say this, but is it possible anyone could confuse, if you were to be parachuted in to Afghanistan, you've got very dark hair and a dark beard. Is it possible that you could be mistaken for an Afghan or an Iranian?
Well, I saw one time I dated this Finnish girl, and she was telling me that she was telling me that if I came over there to live with her in Finland, she was hoping that they wouldn't attack me in a quote unquote racist way and get me mistaken as a Turk or an Arab. I was like, look, I'm white as can be. So, I mean, why would they think of that as like, well, you got dark hair and you got brown eyes? I know, but that's a British thing. It's not a Middle Eastern thing so much. And anyway, I said, I'm white. They said, well, she was starting to say that Syrians are white, which I disagree with her. And but I think we should draw the line. To answer your question, I think we should draw the line and say, like I talked about with the way Jared Taylor seemed to define it pretty properly, saying that anyone whose ancestry comes from Europe in the past 500 years or primarily from there. That I think that's a good way to put it. If you're talking about India, their Aryan invasion goes all the way back to like 2000 BC. That was so far back.
Well, I think that if you, what you mentioned before, Lemuel, that I guess you're a devout Christian.
Yeah.
And there is a concept, I think, that there will be a remnant of people, and the remnant, I think, can apply to what remains of the white race. And I've heard people talk about that. Well, we are the remnant. We have to preserve ourselves. And if you mix so much, then you're no longer part of the remnant. And I thought, oh, I kind of like that. And I think I'd heard that discussion. And then we had at my house, we had a fundraiser for Ron Paul when he was running for president. And he was in my living room and he gave a little speech. And he was talking about, we have to preserve the remnant of our people. And of course, he didn't have the same definition as remnant as I did, or I just listened. But boy, I perked up my ears to see what he's going to say about that. And I think the remnant was more libertarian or whatever it was, but he was using the same analysis. And I think that truly there has to be a remnant, and the remnant is going to be the white people, however we define it. And I think we might be defining it more narrowly than what most people would define it as. And that will be the remnant, and we will rebuild through eugenics with a monarch who will lead us in the right direction.
Oh yeah, I also like to add in the Bible scripture that I like to use it, and that I would say endorses ethno-nationalism. I don't know how to get it up on screen, but it's Acts chapter 17, verse 24, and then go down to verse 26. In fact, I'll read it from here if I can get it up.
Wait, now you're going to pull up the King James version, right? Because
that's the one I prefer. Yeah, King James.
Yeah, if it's not King James version, it's not the Bible. You might as well be reading the Quran if you're going to read the New Standard Version.
Yeah, I agree with you, Bill. All right, it's right here. It says, God that made the world and all things therein, seeing that he is the Lord of heaven and earth, dwelleth not in temples made with hands, neither is worshipped with men's hands, as though he needed anything, seeing he giveth to all life, breath, and all things, and hath made of one blood all nations of men, for to dwell on all the face of the earth, and hath determined the times before appointed, and the bounds of their habitation. That's my biblical argument for ethno-nationalism.
And what was that verse again? What's the
Acts chapter 17, verses 24 through 26.
Very good. When I teach Sunday school class, I'll bring that up.
Good deal. I'm glad you learned something good. I learned from you today as well.
Okay.
But hang on, but what you just said was, he hath made of one blood all the nations of men.
Yeah.
That sounds kind of globalist, actually.
Well, if you think about it, after the Tower of Babel, Noah and his family scattered out. But I would have to go back, if you want to talk about where skin color and that all that comes from, then I would recommend now he's not a nationalist, but he does give a rational argument for why we get different shades of skin color. His name is Ken Ham. On his through his ministry Answers in Genesis, he talks about how some people got more melanin than others.
The thing is that, I mean, what's interesting is that when it comes to the Black people, it's not just skin color. There's a lot more to the distinction of the Negroid race than just skin color. And I mean, basically the whites have a lot in common from all over Europe, and less in common as you get further away from Europe. And so, I mean, that's what I meant when I said the Bluton-Boden definition, up to a point, it really does, the word Boden, I think, is etymologically related to our word abode and abide in English. And what is our abode and where we abide does have a lot to do, I think, with the definition of race, and that's why it seems difficult.
Now, when you say that word, are you saying in German blood and abode? Is that what it is?
No, Bluten-Boden is the phrase.
What does it mean?
That's the blood and soil.
Oh, really? Okay, good. All right.
But that word Boden, it's not just dirt. It's your abode. Your in Greek ekos, your home, your ecology, your economy, those kinds of words. I think that's probably the most direct translation of Boden to something that we'd understand. Think about, but it's just very difficult, because when you think about blonde-haired, blue-eyed Syrians, most Lebanese are way darker than Lemmuel.
Oh yeah, they are. The only reason why Assad, for example, looks kind of light skinned is because he's got a lot of European ancestry in him.
And so, I mean, the descendants of Crusaders, I guess they didn't maintain, they didn't even think about racial purity back then for whatever reason.
No, they didn't.
But, the Crusaders, their presence and the descendants of Roman legionnaires, their presence in the Near East could have yielded, something like the white population of South Africa. And instead, of course, what's happening in South Africa is that they are either being slowly expelled, murdered, or I guess some are intermarrying. I don't know how many, but I'm sure that some are. And the ones who intermarry, of course, their children, as Bill says, will cease to be white.
Okay, well, let's wrap this up if you could for today.
Gotta go. I mean, this is a very interesting discussion, and I think we'll have to continue. Do y'all want to continue tomorrow night as we've been doing?
Yeah, tomorrow night we should be able to. What time do you want to start?
Well, I've got a commitment from Paul. Paul couldn't be here tonight because he's out at meetings in British Columbia, but he said that he wanted to do 8 o'clock Eastern, which would be 5 o'clock Pacific for Bill. Is that a possibility for you, Bill?
Yeah, I can do it, sure.
Okay, Lemmuel, will you join us again?
I'll join you tomorrow at 8.
All right.
It's nice to have somebody who's younger than a dinosaur.
All right. See you guys.
Good night, everybody. Thank you for.
Hey, it's nice to see
bye.
you all again.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Well, that was a very intense session, but we shall adjourn and come back and talk more about Bluten-Boden, the place where we abode, the way we abide, and what is the relation of our abode and our blood. Good night, everybody. It's February the 18th. Michelangelo died on the Italian, Miguel Angel Buonarroti died on this day, and I believe 1564, if memory serves me. Think about Michelangelo, one of the greatest Aryan artists of all history, and we will talk later. I hope that our discussion of race does not seem like medical misinformation to the